Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into the world of management. It seems simple, right? How do you get a group of people to work together and get something done? Well, the answer to that question has changed a lot over the last 100 or so years. So, let's get into it.
You know, our whole story really starts with a simple stopwatch, obsessed with measuring every single second. And it ends right here in our modern world of social networks and human connection. And trust me, that journey from stopwatch to social network, it tells you basically everything you need to know about what it takes to be a great manager today. It's a story full of some pretty wild twists.
And really, this whole thing boils down to one huge question that people have been fighting over for decades. Is managing people a cold, hard science? All about numbers, processes, and efficiency? Or is it a subtle art, something that's all about understanding people?
Okay, so before we can even try to answer that, we've got to get on the same page. What do we actually mean when we say the word management? Let's lay down some of the fundamentals first.
I love this classic definition from Harold Kuntz because it just nails something really important. Look at the wording. Management isn't about doing everything yourself. It's about getting things done through and with other people. That human piece of the puzzle is absolutely central to the whole thing.
Now, to get things done well, managers have to juggle two really critical ideas: efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency is all about doing things right, using the least amount of time, money, and energy. But effectiveness, that's about doing the right things. It's about picking the right goals in the first place. Think of it this way. You can be super efficient at climbing a ladder, really fast, but if that ladder is leaning against the wrong wall, all that efficiency is totally useless. You're not being effective. A great manager has to master both.
So back in the early 20th century, the business world was completely 100% obsessed with just one side of that equation: efficiency. This was the age of the machine, and the big idea was to make human workers just as predictable, just as productive as the gears and levers in a factory.
And this obsession, well, it got a name: scientific management. You might also hear it called Taylorism, after its pioneer, Frederick Winslow Taylor. His goal was, honestly, pretty radical for the time. He wanted to find the single one best way to do any job and just get rid of all wasted motion, all wasted effort.
Taylor's whole system was built on four main ideas. First, stop guessing. Replace old habits with actual science, using things like time and motion studies. Second, don't just hire anyone. Scientifically pick and train the perfect worker for each specific task. Third, make sure everyone, and I mean everyone, follows these scientifically proven methods to the letter. And fourth, divide up the work. Basically, management does all the thinking and the planning, and the workers, well, they just focus on doing the task. And what was the most powerful, world-changing result of all these ideas? The moving assembly line. Henry Ford took Taylor's principles, applied them to making cars, and completely revolutionized manufacturing. It made cars affordable for almost everyone, and no exaggeration, it changed the world.
But there was a massive downside to all of this. This approach literally treated people like they were just cogs in a machine. It totally ignored their creativity, their need to connect with others, their well-being. It led to incredibly boring, soul-crushing work and, not surprisingly, huge pushback from labor unions. So that begs the question, right? What actually happens to your productivity, to your company's morale, to the whole system when you forget that your workers are, human? Well, the answer came from a place no one expected. And that brings us to a factory near Chicago in the 1920s and a series of experiments that were about to flip the entire world of management theory completely on its head. These were the famous Hawthorne studies, which took place at the Western Electric Company. Now, the researchers, guys like Elton Mayo, they walked in there with that classic scientific management way of thinking. They were there to figure out the perfect physical conditions to maximize productivity. So they started messing with stuff, they made the lights brighter, and yep, productivity went up. Great. But then, just to check their work, they made the lights dimmer, and productivity went up again. They added rest breaks, and productivity rose. They took the breaks away. It still rose. They must have been tearing their hair out. The data made absolutely no sense.
And then the big aha moment. It turned out the lighting, the breaks, none of that stuff was the real driver. What mattered was the human attention. The workers felt like someone cared. They felt seen, valued, like they were part of something important. This incredible discovery was named the Hawthorne effect, and it proved that the art of management, all those social and psychological things, were unbelievably powerful motivators.
Okay, so where does all that history leave us today? We've got the science of Taylor on one side and the art discovered at Hawthorne on the other.
The thing is, a great modern manager doesn't pick a side. Their job is to blend both into a practical playbook for leading people effectively.
First off, let's just clarify the different levels here. Think of top-level administration as the one setting the grand strategy. They're focused on the big picture what and why. Management, on the other hand, is on the ground. They're all about implementation, the operational how and when that turns that big strategy into a reality.
And they make that reality happen through 5 core functions. You can totally see Taylor's influence here in things like planning, organizing, and controlling. That's the scientific, process-driven part of the job. But look at directing and staffing. That's all about people, motivation, leadership. That is the direct legacy of the Hawthorne studies, right there.
Now, to pull all this off, every manager needs a mix of 3 essential skills. You've got technical skills for the actual job being done. You need conceptual skills to see the big picture and how everything fits together. But the glue that holds it all together is the human skills, the ability to work with, understand, and motivate other people, individually and in groups. This is the bridge that connects everything we've talked about.
But you know what? In the 21st century, there's one more layer to this whole thing, and it has become completely non-negotiable. It's not enough to be efficient, it's not enough to be effective, you also have to be ethical. For a perfect example of what happens when ethics go out the window, let's look at a pretty famous cautionary tale. Back in 2015, the world found out that Volkswagen had been intentionally, systematically, cheating on emissions tests for years, all to chase profit and market share. The result was an absolute catastrophe. We're talking more than $30 billion in fines. Their reputation, which they'd carefully built around being eco-friendly, was completely shattered. Consumer trust, not just in VW, but across the whole car industry, plummeted. And of course, there was the very real environmental damage from millions of cars. It's a staggering cost for unethical management.
Now, for a really powerful contrast, let's take a look at the Tata Group in India, a massive company that is widely respected for having a really strong ethical core.
During the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, one of their companies, Tata Steel, made an absolutely remarkable promise. They announced that the families of any employees who tragically died from the virus would keep receiving their full salary and keep their housing right up until what would have been the employee's retirement age. Can you imagine? The result wasn't just a headline. It was deep, lasting employee loyalty, immense respect from society, and a brand built on real trust, not just on transactions.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. As technology, AI, and automation get better and better at handling the scientific, process-driven parts of work, what's left for the human manager to do? In a world filled with algorithms, does that uniquely human skill, the ability to inspire, to connect, to motivate, to show you care, does that become the single most valuable asset of all? Something to think about.